All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another CCH podcast. We have another great guest, but this is a familiar face, somebody who we've had on the podcast, I believe, last season. And it was such a good conversation. And if you guys have been following on Instagram, you know that we went live for a Frog Week discussion. But without further ado, I just want to introduce Sean. And go ahead, the floor is yours. Tell us who you are and what you do, and even explain what you do does, if that makes sense.
So I'm Sean Murphy. I am currently the reptile manager at Preuss Pets in Lansing, Michigan. I'm also their main educator, so I go out to the public and go to schools, retirement homes, science fairs, and do in-house stuff as well. I also work with some conservation whenever I can. Primarily, I help out Project Golden Frog. I raise money year-round for them to then send down to Panama to help with their facilities and their maintenance and everything like that. And then I'm also a former zookeeper. I worked at Zoo Tampa down in Tampa. And then I also worked at Binder Park Zoo in Battle Creek, Michigan.
Awesome. I was trying to pull it up. Does Preuss Pets have a website?
Yeah, just PreussPets.com.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to kind of show... there we go. Okay, it just took me a second here to get this rolling. So I can kind of show the screen here so that way you guys have a chance to see. Can you guys see?
Yep.
Preuss Pets, there we go. All right, yeah. So we got a gift card.
Our website could use a little work. I'm just going to throw that out there like from the get-go. It's not the easiest to navigate, but we are working.
That's all right. I think that it's an amazing place, though. I think... Well, do you guys have any pictures on here of, like, the pond?
This already looks a lot better than I remember. I haven't looked on there in a long time.
We've been slowly going through. We have a new IT guy who he took over the admin of the website from a company that we had doing it, and we're trying to clean it up and make it a little bit more user friendly. In fact, he and I kind of have like a minimalist perspective when it comes to websites. So eventually most of the stuff is going to disappear and you'll just have like a photo section, like just like pond, reptiles, birds, like whatever. And there'll be just the most basic stuff like going to our Shopify or connecting to our social media. Because right now, if you really try to go through the website, there's like 50 different links throughout the whole thing. So, but if there was any of the pond stuff, it would most likely be under a fish room. And I would maybe try aquariums, but right now I think that there's a lot of focus on salmon in the classroom, which is part of a conservation thing that our aquatics department has been doing for years now, of setting up starter aquariums in classrooms all around the state for kids to raise up salmon from fry until they're essentially big enough to be reintroduced back out to the river systems. So this year, Steve told me the amount of money that brought in to do it, but I think essentially they set up like 24 or close to 36 full-size tanks, and these are like giant, like, you know, anywhere between like 90 to like 200-gallon tanks that have to have chillers, and then like really big filtration systems and specialized lighting and everything. So I think the farthest tank they did was Sault Ste. Marie, because they did 2 in a day. They went to Alpena, then they went to Sault Ste. Marie, and then came back down to Lansing.
Wow.
And
that's
so
a cool idea.
For those of you who aren't from Michigan, where we are at in Lansing, Michigan, Sault Ste. Marie is up in the Upper Peninsula. So it was roughly a 4.5 to 5 hour drive to go set up that farthest tank.
Yeah,
Wow.
It's a 4-hour drive, like, exactly, to get to Alpena from here.
Yeah.
My folks have a cottage up that way.
Yeah, so we've always done aquarium maintenance around the entire state. But the salmon in the classroom is part of, well, one part of like conservation stuff that we do. We also set up tanks at MSU for the research facilities. So we've set up the electric fish lab, we've set up jellyfish labs, axolotl labs, eel labs, lamprey labs. That's why I could think off the top of my head over the last 3 years. Like
How
we learned,
many salmon
yeah.
does the classroom get? How many do you end up going through the program total?
I'm not sure. So I only help out with that as needed if they just need people for lifting. Steve, who is our uh, store general manager and head of the aquatics department, he's the one who heads up all the salmon in the classroom stuff. And he's extremely meticulous, and he actually went to school, I think, for mathematics at one point. So he's got spreadsheet upon spreadsheet of exactly like how many fish went out where, what equipment we use, cost going into it, what came out of it. Like, I'm sure at some point the store will release a statement about it, but it's pretty amazing the scale at which he does things. It's always impressive.
Nice.
There's some conversation we can get into a little bit later with that for what we're trying to do with tadpoles and other things as well, which would make for an interesting conversation. But I think this is kind of healthy because we're talking about Preuss Pets, and you guys are definitely a destination place for aquariums, but you also are a wealth of knowledge for reptiles. And I just kind of wanted to get a conversation started with both of you guys about where your thoughts are of what the reptile industry is right now with like care for herps. And I know Brian was supposed to be on for this one, but like just in a way the saturation in the market, a lot of some of the more common animals, you could just find them anywhere now. But just overall, I guess, what are your thoughts on where the reptile industry is as of like today in October?
Amelia, you can go first if you want.
I'm sorry, I was zoning out a little bit because one of my toads was doing something weird and I was trying to figure out what she was up to.
All right, I'll go first then. Give you some time to collect your thought.
Yes, please. Thank you.
From a husbandry perspective, and I literally just went with an MSU club yesterday that came into the store to talk about welfare and husbandry in a captive setting. Leaps and bounds are being made every year, I think. There's always new lighting. There's always new heat sources. There's always new substrates. Obviously, enclosures have become a really big trend to just go as big as you can, which I am never opposed to unless it's an animal that actually gets scared by being in a large enclosure. And it's really interesting because you have the old school guys who are like, oh yeah, my snakes are fine in a tub with some heat tape. Don't worry about it. And then you have somebody who comes in, they're like, well, I know you recommend a 75 to a 90 for my ball python, but I want to get it like a 220. Is that okay? It's like, yeah, that's definitely okay. I feel like, especially since COVID, we've seen people being more meticulous and putting more thought and more passion into the way that they do setups. I feel like it used to be like pulling teeth, trying to get somebody to buy just the necessities for a bearded dragon. Like, do I have to have a UVB? Do I have to do a heat lamp? It's like, yeah, you do, or your animal's going to die. Now people are like, here, how about you just grab everything that you would set it up with and just go with that? And I can't tell you how many times in the last year people have literally said, how would you do it? And I was like, well, what's your budget? Like, do you want like the minimal? Do you want like mid-grade? Or do you want like luxury sedan? They're like, whatever the animal needs, I need you to go grab it. And so, like, I mean, I'll go grab every single thing. I'm still kind of, conscious about the money, but I'll put a tank together and be like, yeah, that's fine. Should I add anything else? I'm like, I mean, you could add this to it. You could add that to it, whatever. It's been really enjoyable. It's made doing sales, which, I mean, I love my job, but when you do retail, there's certain personalities and people you kind of have to learn to deal with. And some of them are people that are extremely resistant to whatever you want to give them. And so to be able to have this new flow, especially younger people who are like, yeah, just like, let's do it all. Let's get everything we possibly get. It's really refreshing because then it's like, all right, cool. Like, yeah, let's go ahead and do this Finex light. Let's go ahead and do a dimmable heat lamp. Let's just make it bioactive. And they're like, yeah, sure. Bioactive sounds awesome. I love growing plants. Like, let's do it. So because of that, we've transitioned the type of stuff we carry. I mean, our primary substrate used to be Eco Earth. and it's still a mainstay. You know, I think most reptile keepers use it, but now I sell a lot more Reptisoil, which is like the next step up. But I sell even more Biodude, you know, and Biodude's not cheap. I mean, it's a full-on bioactive substrate meant for all kinds of different habitats and climates. But I mean, I got people throwing out money, be like, yeah, cool, like let's do that. Let's grab 6 or 7 plants. Go ahead and get me a misting system. Let's do a humidifier system. It's like, all right, cool. Like let's do this. And now, you know, there's sometimes I'll end up spending like a hour and a half or 2 hours with somebody, basically shopping for them, grabbing everything I think is a necessity, and then just explaining to them how to set it up and why it needs to be there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love running into those kind of customers at shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it starts to get rid of some of the stigma of our industry. Reptiles are still, I think, kind of bottom of the totem pole as far as like animal care and the way people look at them. I mean, everybody's going to put dogs and cats at the top, and birds are up there, and aquarium keepers are going to go all out. And because you still have some people selling baby turtles that they caught in a pond, and you still have some people just throwing a bunch of snakes in a tank on a bunch of pine shavings, Reptile still gets kind of a bad rap. But I feel like that is starting to go by the wayside, and we're starting to see a lot more progress, especially when we're seeing more influence from the European industry. Germany, in particular, is like decades ahead of us as far as how we keep animals. I mean, the amount of cool stuff that they bring in, like Owasi is this German company, and they sell these things called bio orbs, which have their own humidifier and misting system in them, their own specialized water. And now they made this tank called, I think it's called the Edge, but it's like a 40-gallon tank with rounded corners so you can see through the corner. So it's not like angled like that. And it has its own heating system above and below, its own misting system, its own humidifier system, and its own UVB lights. And all of them are plug and play. So if a light goes out, you just unplug it and you hook a brand new one back in. Same with all their heating coils, same with their misters. I mean, this stuff is like kind of like mind blowing in the reptile industry because no one puts that kind of effort into it. But here it is.
So
You have a lot
what kind of animals would you recommend for that sort of thing? Because I was under the impression that they were more of like a plants and invertebrates kind of a setup. But if they've got like UVB going on in there, there's got to be a little bit more that they can handle.
Yeah, so the orbs, those are more plant oriented, and we've been keeping inverts in them. We do isopods and also millipedes in them with like no problem. I did set one up for a singular dart frog for a school teacher last year, and he says it's doing great. Now the Edge tank, that's the one that's actually meant to be specifically for dart frogs and smaller frogs. In fact, this company is amazing. They'll take whatever criticism you have and they'll build that into the next tank. So the top is sealed in on it, and to take it off, you risk like losing the frogs or like losing your heat and humidity. So they built this cup that you dump your food into. You slide a little thing off the top, you put the cup in, and then when you turn it 90 degrees, it drops all the flies or crickets in. So nice. They've come up with all these systems to make sure that like you actually have a fully enclosed ecosystem. They're not cheap. I mean, it's like $2,000 for that tank with that system. But when we were pricing things out at the store, if you wanted me to build you a Viv the same size, and I said, okay, well, I got to drill it for drainage, and we're going to put in a drainage layer and bioactive. I'm going to add all these things to it. It ended up coming up to almost $2,000. So when all is said and done, buying that fully enclosed system is actually really worth the money. And now they're going to be working on tanks at different sizes. So they're going to go a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, and like see how they work out.
So there was a company not long ago, about 5 to 6 years ago, called Biopod, and it was a big thing on social media. And I thought it was going to be cutting edge because at the time they were promoting all the same stuff that you're talking about, up to a 75-gallon tank. I have no idea. I'm pretty sure they went out of business, and I think that it's a great idea. And I think all of us as like reptile and amphibian keepers kind of think about how cool that would be. I think there are just some things that would make me a little more hesitant, though. It's kind of like, in my opinion, it's kind of more like the Mac versus PC debate. Like, you want to have all the control and set it all up the way you want it, or do you want to have it just ease of use? There it is. And I think you can have both and still appreciate them. Like we were talking about off camera, Sean. I don't think I would be opposed to trying it. I'm just presenting something for the viewers to think about. Like, let's use the biopod example for just a moment. So, like, let's say somebody goes and buys one of those things, and they have all the lights, they have all the materials that you need, and then let's say they go out of business, and now you need a new light bulb or you need something else, and it's it's such a specific part. Like Apple was guilty of this with different things, like. And now the phone companies, if you have one problem that you could probably fix for $10, you got to buy a new phone. And my fear would be if the LED lights would go, or the heat, or something. And I'm not like knocking the brand whatsoever. I'm just saying like the hesitancy that I would have of doing that, which I think cutting edge is amazing, and they need to come into the United States more. So I'm not trying to sound like a Debbie Downer whatsoever. I'm just saying like I would just be concerned because I almost bought a biopod. Like I was really close. I wanted to save up a little more to get it. And now, like in hindsight, if I would have purchased that, I'd be stuck because there's no care for it. Like you can't call them. There's no like whatever happens to your tank now is going to happen. If they're, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, that all makes total sense. And it's like, I think across the board, the three of us have probably seen a lot of companies come and go, even in the last 5 years. Where it's like, the next big thing, like, our habitats are better than anybody else's, and then all of a sudden you just don't hear from them. I will say, at least on the WASI end, because they're based in Europe, they've been around for like 20 or 30 years. But then you're looking at, okay, if they don't have a U.S. distribution side anymore, now you're paying, to have stuff shipped internationally. Yeah. Our rep for the Midwest goes around to a lot of frog and reptile shows. And he has like a ton of displays. So I think in February or March, there's like a frog fest in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Josh's was there last time. I showed up on my own will just to like look at stuff, but they were there set up with that. So if that comes through, I'll let you know. It might be worth the drive over to Ann Arbor just because one, it's all frog people. It's no reptiles. It's all dart frogs and tree frogs and toads. And it's really cool. Like I got a lot of cool thumbnail species when I was there. But yeah, like the guy, their rep is really cool. He'll take any criticism you have and just be like, yeah, you know what, cool. And like he'll literally write it down. He's like, I'm gonna go talk to the engineers about this. I'm gonna go make sure that like this is something that's addressed. Yep, we've already actually thought about that with our prototype. They're working on it right now. So they seem like a company that, because they've been established in Europe for a while, that they're pretty set. It's trying to break ground in the U.S. And I think one of the things, like circling back around to the husbandry thing, is a lot of reptile keepers in the U.S. are stuck in the old ways of, like, hey, well, I've done it this way for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. My dad did it this way for 40 years. It's fine keeping your snake that way. It's fine keeping your turtle that way. It's like, yeah, it could be. But what I always tell people when they don't want like a big enough enclosure for their animals, like, and they get resistant with me, it's like, well, can you fit in the trunk of your car? And they're like, yeah. I go, can you live in the trunk of your car? Well, no, like that'd be stupid. I go, okay, well, it's the same thing throwing your animal in this tiny enclosure. Like, you want to have room, you want space. We all try to upgrade throughout our lives. We've all lived in crappy apartments, and then when it's time to move, we're like, I kind of want to go bigger, or I want something a little nicer, a better neighbor, and whatever else. It's the same thing with dealing with our animals.
I completely agree with that. I think that it's good that they're going to challenge the mentality, and you're right about the way people are. I'm definitely by no stretch to the audience an orthodox keeper, so I would not listen to it. Like, I'm not looking to give advice, but I would definitely consider Sean or Amelia in this. You guys are more of the experts in that. Even though I keep animals and stuff, I just wouldn't necessarily consider myself a part of that because I'm very unorthodox with what I keep and the way I do it. But
you're very much the go big or go home type of person.
Yeah, I think you're discrediting yourself a lot there. unorthodox keeping is what has led to like revolutions and breakthroughs in how we keep animals. It's that unorthodox keeping, that thinking outside the box, is what has pushed us to change how we take care of things, and for the better. So don't discredit yourself there, downplay yourself there. The setups you show me and describe what you've done for your animals is pretty amazing.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to share two things. I don't really know. Well, the one you guys are definitely going to know of, but let me share my screen here as we're on this conversation. Yes, okay, we're on. So, of course, we all know Mist King and now they're Jungle Hobbies, or are they both? It's like always the age-old question, like who is who and what is what. But anyway, getting down to, in actuality, I've been using this light specifically, the Mist, what do they call it? The advanced lighting system. And this is really crazy because
that thing is pricey.
It is, but now I've introduced sunrise and sunset for my animals, and like, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. I could grow any plant that I want in their tanks. This is only if your animal doesn't need UVB. It does get hot. It's a 92 watt bulb, like light. It's crazy hot. It'll melt if you put it on top of acrylic without the bait, like without the legs. I found that out before it was bad, so I was very fortunate, but it gets very hot and you cannot look directly into it. It's not good. But anyway, there's also
how long is this?
What's the lumen on that?
Let me see.
Does it give you wattage or lumen?
So the wattage is 92 watts.
Jesus.
I just see the temperature.
Let's see.
So not gonna lie, when I needed a couple new full spectrum lights for my dart frogs, just mainly for my plants because they're not UVB lights either, I found this company on Amazon, and I think I paid $20 per light, and it doesn't nearly have the amount of remote functions that you're showing there by any means.
Oh, it's 96 watt.
But I can put it on like 6, 8, 10, or 12 hour cycles. And I thought it would just flip my lights on and flip them off, and it doesn't. It like slowly gets brighter and brighter and brighter over the course of about 20 minutes. And then at nighttime, it does the same thing. It slowly dims it and then keeps a blue light on for like 20 minutes and then goes dark.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to ask you to send me a link there, Sean.
Yeah.
I think I found something at Preuss, actually, last year that I picked up for my rain frogs that does that same kind of gradual transition thing, and I like it, but it definitely wasn't $20.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're talking about Exoterra's Terra Sky.
Yeah.
No, this was before the Terra Sky came out, actually.
Okay.
What are your opinions on the Terra Sky, actually? Have you tried it out yet?
Yeah, I mean, I have it over one of the it was over one of the nuke tanks at the store. Now we have it over top of our fire belly toads. I like it. It has a lot of options. I'm a very, very basic, straightforward kind of guy on stuff. I don't really care that it has like 30 different settings. All I care about is that it can turn off and turn on its own. And I think it's cool that it has the dimming feature. I did think it was pretty cool that you can basically do like a cloudy and like thunderstorm feature with it. I feel like this was Exoterra trying to break into a higher end market. And from a price point, they failed because that's an expensive light. Retail value on it, I think their suggested value was something like 120 or 130 for like a 16-inch light. And I think
I'm sure it's just because like VivTech is their only real competitor with like quality, workable LED UVBs in the US.
Well, and like I ended up knocking the price down to 100, and they weren't selling. So now I just have them at 25% off in my clearance section. Yeah. So now if that's Amazon, they're now at 60. But a year ago they were like double that price.
I might have to swing by and yoink some of those.
Do it. Definitely do it. Get them off my shelves.
I think that they're trying. Look at this. Look at the remote. Okay, and then wait. Hold on a second. Where was that picture? Yeah. So look at the remote and look at the design. Okay, now let's go back to the Jungle Hobbies light. Like, doesn't it kind of look like maybe this is what they were trying to compete with in a way?
Oh yeah, and Exoterra does try to do the high end stuff at an affordable price.
Yeah, yeah,
Good for
this is
that.
definitely not affordable for most people.
Right, and like it's a niche market to like break into like what would be considered high end stuff, but for a good price. Most of the lights that we use at the store for our plants and for our vivariums are almost always aquarium lights.
Yeah,
Um, because like we use Finex and Stingray and like there's like two other companies, and you could buy like a 24-inch like Finex light for $100 that has the dimming features in its full spectrum, and that thing is meant to penetrate down enough to get your aquatic plants growing. Now, what's interesting is the wattage, like on the one you were showing, was so unbelievably high. Whereas
It
on
is
most of the
very high.
yeah, whereas most of the LEDs
oh,
we carry are like anywhere between like maybe 11 to possibly 20 watts, and they put out very little heat. So when you're talking like something that's up at like 90 watts or 100 watts or 150 watts, I mean, you're talking about a lot of heat output too, which depending on the ventilation in your room is going to start to throw your tanks off a little bit.
yeah, no, 100%, and it could also melt anything if you like don't know. Um,
But you know,
but
house fires aren't fun.
no,
So uh,
this is the other light that I have that's next to it on the big tank. I don't know exactly what size. It's 25 watt. I never got the Wi-Fi capabilities to work, but I have it plugged into a smart power strip, so I don't really care. It doesn't really bother me.
yeah,
It's one of those. It's on off, but it's meant to be the secondary light. But like you said, Sean, uh, I think the best company ever that made aquarium lights was called Odyssey. I don't know if you remember them. They were 90s, early 2000s. The light that I bought when I first got into the hobby still works, and it's currently on the White's Tree Frog. So it's been 11 years. I've only had to replace like twice. What is that?
that's the light I got off Amazon.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
it's called Seaura, Seaoura, LED aquarium light for plants, full spectrum fish tank light with auto timer. Right now it's $23. It's a 14-watt light.
Nice.
Yeah.
How
So
long is this?
what was that?
How long is this? Does it say 24 inches?
18 to 24. So it's an 18-inch light spreading up to a 24-inch fixture.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is right there. So far, I've been really happy with that light. Like I said, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that the other ones do. I think that's why it's like a $23 light. I would like to be able to control the lighting a little bit more as far as like when it's dimming on and on instead of just saying like 6, 8, or 10-hour cycle or whatever. But you do have the capability of going into it and self-dimming the lights and saying, okay, I don't want my whites at this high. I can lower those down. And then it goes ahead and like adds that in when it automatically turns on. So it's got some interesting features. Like I said, I'm a pretty straightforward guy when it comes to that. So that one was like really easy for me. Instead of having to read through a manual, I was just like, cool, I can plug it in and I can go, and that's what I do.
So, I also wanted to kind of bring that up about the jungle hobbies at the same time. I think it's just really cool some of the stuff that we're able to do. I think this is crazy for a light, but
I thought I was reading that wrong at first. It's like, I hope that's $100 light. It's like, no, that's a $700 light.
yeah, I definitely will not be getting the double, and I can't imagine 192 watts just sitting there on top of like anything.
Dude, that's like going like old school, like what they used to do over saltwater tanks, where you had like 4 or 5 actinic lights, and it'd heat up to like 150 degrees, and you had to have cooling fans. Well, you guys are probably too young to remember this, but our old school tanks, like when Preuss was at its old location, even when it moved to a new location, a standard saltwater tank would have like 4 to 6 or sometimes even 8 lights over top of it. And they were all like 60 to 100 watts. And so you had to have cooling fans mounted up above the lights just to remove all the heat that the lights were putting out. And if your fans went out, it would cook your tank.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I could
Yeah.
believe that.
So, I mean, leaps and bounds, like as far as all that stuff's gone. The highest end lights that we carry for saltwater tanks are around $700 to $800. And those ones are like,
The radon, right?
yeah, and like I think one's from like the Neptune systems,
Yeah.
and there's one other one. But I mean, those things you can connect to weather apps, and you can go through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and connect all of them through your phone. There's
Is there a
so,
particular reason that saltwater tends to need a higher end light? Is it something to do with like the density of the water with the salinity or the types of corals and stuff folks want to grow, or
so it's a little bit of all.
okay.
Depending on the type of corals, they need a certain amount of lumen coming in, and then the water's going to refract all that. So you have to have a high enough penetration rate of your light to break the surface of the water and then reach down to the coral without burning it. So a lot of times when they recommend lights over there, it's dependent on size of the tank, type of coral, and like a few other factors.
I also think an additional part to that, though, is because of the market. Like, it's been a long-staying market, and people dump money into saltwater aquariums. And I'm not saying the reptile and amphibian industry isn't, like, growing, but compared to the saltwater aquariums that people have, how much money they're dumping into them, they can be more specific. They can have those high-end things. We're just scratching the surface for high-end with reptiles and amphibians.
Saltwater people pay as much for their tanks as any one of us would pay for a car.
Yeah.
And
Oh, hands down.
Flat out, not kidding. Like, I've seen people put down $15,000 deposits for a saltwater tank.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then you go to these, like, because I help do the deliveries and installs sometimes. Oh my God. Like, you walk in these people's houses. I mean, we're walking into like $5 to $10 million houses. You know, they have 15 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is like my 5th, like, 500-gallon tank. I wanted one that I could look at, you know, when I'm in my gym instead of when I'm in my living room. And it's like, wow, dude, like, I wish I had that kind of money to put towards anything. But,
For real.
Yeah, but I mean, it's impressive, you know, but, you know, kind of like what we were talking about, you know, with like Europeans being farther ahead of us and everything. That's where saltwater is, too. But that also calls to the nature of the animal. Like, saltwater keeping has to have high end. You can't half-ass keeping saltwater animals. It just doesn't work. Reptiles are more resilient. You can, in some cases, half-ass them. And they typically are okay. But, like, once you get into aquariums, whether it's freshwater or saltwater, you have to step it up. It's just part of the game.
If I was not, like, I'll explain this. I really stand by the Mist King or Jungle Hobby, whatever they want to call themselves, lights. From what I have experienced with the plants and the animals, they seem to really receive it well. And I mean, this is by no stretch a one glove fits all mentality. You know, I'm doing something niche with native species and like experimenting a little bit. But from what I've seen, with the different, I've tried a lot of different lights, more so aquarium than reptile, but I just really do think that if somebody could get it, if they have the means to like set it up properly so it doesn't melt your tank or like burn you, I do think it's a fantastic light. If I were not getting these, I would probably be getting the radon or however you pronounce it, because I know somebody who had it programmed for a very large jungle vivarium. It was almost like a shower size, like how big it was. And he said he'd like come into his office where it's at, and it'd be in the middle of a rainstorm. Like you could program it with like your lights and I don't know, like the misting system. I don't know. You could set it up all together with different things. And I don't know if he had it hooked up to a Raspberry Pi, but it was just crazy. I guess the features that you got with that light, and for how expensive it is, it better be. It's like $400 for a little square.